So I think there is still a taboo. I mean, I'm quite visual. I walk around in shorts and t-shirts with metal limbs showing, and even now, even over the weekend, I'll be on the beach, and kids will always come and ask, which is brilliant. And for someone like me, I'm very outgoing. I'm happy to chat to the kids and explain what's going on. But you can still see that parents are a little bit reluctant, a little bit worried that they're going to upset.
Around 1 in 15 of us has a disability, yet still it can be a misunderstood and even taboo subject. In 2017, the government published a disability strategy, which it updated last year. It aims to improve the lives of disabled islanders, but also to raise awareness of the issues that disabled people face, among the other 75%. This week, as part of the next phase of the strategy, and coinciding with the start of the Paralympic Games in Tokyo, an online survey has been launched, which is open to every islander, disabled or not, to complete. Stuart Penn, a para-martial arts world champion whose day job is operations manager at Skills Jersey, joins me now to explain why the survey is important. So Stuart, you're involved in the launch today of the disability survey. Can you just tell me a little bit what it's about?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I've been brought on board for this pretty much, if you like, as a sort of face to actually get it out there, because I don't mind doing public speaking. I've got several limbs missing, which I'll go into in a minute. But the whole point of this survey is to actually get everyone feeling comfortable and having their say, not just people with disabilities, but actually people who are able-bodied or know people with disabilities, or people just want to have an opinion and want to have a say about the wider strategy, and just to make disability a conversation piece, to actually get it visible, to get it accessible, to get people able to talk about it as though it's not a taboo.
Do you think there is still a hesitancy to talk about disability, that people still feel a little bit awkward?
Yeah, I think they do. I think naturally, I mean, there's to coincide with the Paralympic Games starting today, is that they've got the launching a global campaign. So actually, in Jersey, we're kind of one step ahead of them, in that we were already going with this a little bit and timed it well. There's the We the 15 is a campaign. It's a global campaign to actually look about talking about disabilities, but also in a more practical way, to get away from that taboo, to get away from people being scared to have the conversations, and also to steer people not just towards the elite, if you like, the putting people on pedestals when they achieve things with disabilities, but also what about their day-to-day life? What about how they get dressed? What about looking after the kids? What about the fact that people with disabilities are just human beings that do the same as everyone else? So I think there is still a taboo. I mean, I'm quite visual. I walk around in shorts and t-shirts with metal limbs showing, and even now, even over the weekend, I'll be on the beach, and kids will always come and ask, which is brilliant. And for someone like me, I'm very outgoing. I'm happy to chat to the kids and explain what's going on. But you can still see that parents are a little bit reluctant, a little bit worried that they're going to upset. And I understand that. And for some people with disabilities, that there is still that taboo as well for them. So this is kind of not just for people, able-bodied people, to feel more comfortable about talking about disabilities, but also disabled people like myself as well, being able to talk about it, to be able to feel that they can just have a conversation and share this. And we aren't superheroes, but also we're not someone to pity. We're just human beings.
We're about to see the Paralympics. How important has that been in seeing high-level disabled sport, in furthering the cause, in reducing that stigma?
It's so important. I mean, I was involved in disabled athletics 20 plus years ago, and when I competed internationally, it was embarrassing. You turn up, you get a free t-shirt and a free medal just for turning up. And I'd competed in able-bodied sports for years at quite a high level, so I just couldn't believe it. Now it's come so far. It is now, I mean, you see it gets the same coverage as the Olympics. People are held up in the same esteem as the Olympics. It is people that are training elitely to achieve something. And I think what we want to have the conversation about is actually, it's only the same as yourself seeing the Olympics. You might be as fast as everybody as Usain Bolt, I don't know, but you look at that and be inspired by it. But it's inspired in your day-to-day life. You might want to get fit, you might want to run more just from seeing that, or take up a new sport. So it's exactly the same for disabled people. We don't all see the Paralympics and go, that's it, I'm going to go and do the Paralympics. It might be, I've never had a go, wheelchair football or wheelchair rugby, or I'm going to have a go at that and see if I can try it.
And it's part of the role of your role, but also the team that are building the disability strategy, is to make sure that disability features in everyday strategies. For instance, earlier this year we had the launch of the 10-year sports strategy, and part of your role presumably is to make sure that disability is an integral part of that.
Definitely. The whole point, I mean, we've got the whole Embrace Our Difference campaign going on with the survey that we've opened. And it is, the key areas aren't just about kind of talking about disability. It's actually linking in with everything, whether that's health, well-being, education, employment. It's actually, let's look at it. There's always going to be a disabled person in all of those strategies. There needs to be a disabled mention in there. We need to take it into account and be comfortable enough to have conversations about it, so that it isn't a fear of having the conversation and we have to do something special about it. It's the same conversation as for everyone else, just with disability in mind.
So we're looking, the survey's going to draw out perceptions, it's going to identify stigmas. Let's look at your own personal story, and perhaps you could just explain about some of the challenges that you've overcome. And perhaps, because we're a pod, starting off with explaining your own disability.
Certainly. You might have to cut me short. Anyone that's ever heard me speak before is I can do about 3 hours talking about myself. It's my favourite subject.
Let's go for it.
I was born with just one fully formed limb. So I have my right leg missing through the knee. I have my left arm missing just below the elbow. I also have my left foot and leg. So there's the fibula missing from my left leg, which gives me a deformed small foot with just 2 toes, which is kind of stuck in a pointed down position, which means I walk a bit like a T-Rex if I don't wear a prosthetic limb on that side as well. And now on my right leg that I talked about that was missing through the knee, I actually had half a foot on there, which was amputated when I was a baby. My parents took the decision to amputate that so that I could wear prosthetic limbs. The bizarre thing is that they left the heel and the Achilles tendon on that residual limb, or that stump as well, as we call them, which makes a lovely bell shape, which actually gives me the benefit, a lot more grip, if you like, on prosthetic limbs than most other people. So, I'm 40, and so I grew up in a time when my first leg, it was literally a wooden peg leg. It didn't have a foot on. It was just a piece of wood that stuck down and was strapped onto my waist by a leather band. And my parents tell me the story that they took 4-year-old Stuart to go and get his first wooden leg, and he was so excited that I was going to be able to walk and I was going to be just like all the other kids. Got there and saw this peg leg, and obviously burst into tears. But one of the key things that it ties into kind of overcoming diversity and being able to have the conversation is that my parents at that point just had a conversation with me. They said, well, what's wrong? What is it that's upsetting you? And the simple answer was, I wanted to see 2 feet. When I looked down at my trousers, I wanted to see 2 feet sticking out, like every other kid. So my parents went, all right, well, that's easy to solve. So they got a boot, they got some 1980s sellotape and sellotape the boot to the leg. So I was happy. So it was that, it wasn't that fear of conversation, it wasn't that sudden, oh no, we need to backtrack and get him away from this and put him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, which isn't a good idea, because if you only got one hand, you're just going to go around in circles. So we found a solution and adapted it and overcome it, and it was a simple solution. So it is that's kind of set the standard for me always throughout my life, is that actually let's have a look at this. What do I want? How do I get it? If my disability is making it a challenge, how do I overcome it? I grew up with those sort of legs throughout most of my teenage years. I did go to, if you like, normal school. My parents wanted me to go to a normal public school. There was special schools at the time, but they felt that the challenge was there. I should embrace it as much as I could. And I was lucky in that I went to a school where everyone just treated me as normal.
Yes.
It wasn't this stigma. Now I walked a lot slower than people, especially as wooden legs are created by carpenters, so they used to make them 6 inches longer than they needed to be, so that as a child I could grow into them. So I walked funny, I looked different, but other than that, very much treated the same. And in some ways that was the success. There was no extra provision given to me. It was a case of, okay, let's do this. Now I'm sure that people did look after me, people were aware of it, they'd have conversations about me, but there was never a big issue made out of it. And that's what I like about Jersey's approach, if you like, to this survey and to this conversation. It's not a big deal. We're not making we're not just targeting, okay, disabled people, tell us your thoughts. We're asking everyone. It's a conversation for everyone to have, and how we're all one society. We've got a lovely close community here that works together. It's that conversation of, this is here, it's normal, let's have a conversation about it and let's move it on. And I think throughout my life has always been a little bit like that. Whenever I've come across challenges, come across stigma, it's a case of, okay, well, if that's upsetting or if this is difficult, how can I adapt it? How can I move around it? And if you hold that inside and don't have that conversation, it's difficult to move on.
And in terms of you were in the segregated school, you were fully immersed in a normal life, and was that the exception, or was that the norm for society at that time.
It was definitely the exception at the time. It wasn't the dumb thing. It was a case of, I mean, my parents said they did have to fight for me to be allowed to go to a normal school. It was more of a thing that you went to a special school where people could have special provisions around you. And that's understandable. You do, whenever I talk to people with disabilities, I spent many years working with people getting over accidents or people in the military overcoming loss of limbs. And I always start at the point of start with nothing and see if you can adapt yourself. Then when you realise, actually, I've gone as far as I can with no support, help, technology, changes to the landscape or the buildings, that's when you then bring those in. Because actually, if you want to have that self-confidence that you can get from A to B, you want to know that you've got that ability to do it within yourself. However, you might need some help. We all do. If I take my prosthetic limbs off, those stairs we just walked up would take me a lot longer and be a lot more difficult.
Yes.
So you do need those support, those devices, but it's ascertaining what you need and being able to ask for it and being able to. And I think that's another thing is never being scared of asking for help. And part of that is that taboo. Part of, we mentioned with things like the Paralympics, of putting people with disabilities on pedestals and really praising them, is then that can create a fear of them asking for help.
Yes.
My wife's quite funny, caught me out once. I was putting cufflinks in to go out on a big night out, black tie, and I was so determined to put the cufflinks in with my mouth using my teeth on my right hand that it took me 25 minutes, and I came downstairs really pleased with myself, and I've done it, and my sleeve was just covered in saliva, the shirt was unwearable, and my wife's just like, why didn't you just ask me to do it? And it's like, okay, so you've got to understand when you've got to start asking for help as well.
Have you to get where you are now, has it required more tenacity than perhaps if you didn't have a disability? Have you had to develop a mindset, determination to overcome your disability?
I think I'm fortunate in that my parents very much brought me up in that mindset, in that you've got to do it. You are, to tie my shoelaces, they'd leave me there with shoes for however long it took to learn to tie my shoelaces on my own. And I'm fortunate in that, obviously being born with limbs missing and the disabilities, I've never known any difference. So for me to do it, I'm learning from ground zero. Whereas if you've lost limbs or there's other impactors, then it is more difficult. There's without a doubt, because you know the difference and you've got to overcome that. But then you can still get the same mindset. It's cliche, but people always say, we all learn to walk as babies, and you see a baby learn to walk. How many times do they fall over? They don't give up after the 15th, 16th time and decide, walking's not for me, I'll just crawl around for the rest of my life. But, so we've all got that inside of us, because we all learn to walk if we're able to. It's sometimes just tapping into that and making sure that we don't forget how much we can achieve, how much, if you're resilient and determined, you can achieve things. Sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's slower, sometimes you have to do it a little bit of a different way, but you can get there.
And your primary role is within Skills Jersey.
Yes.
In your day-to-day job, is your disability a factor at all?
No, it isn't. I mean, very much working at Skills Jersey, it's all about skills, education, careers, guidance, or looking at the world of work and actually how do we bring that into schools. So actually nothing to do with my disability. It's quite funny because people often assume, I do public speaking about my disability in my life, and people assume that that's my job. And it's actually, well, no, actually, I have a day job as well, if you like.
Yeah.
So it isn't. It's completely separate. But it does help with that mindset again for young people. It's easy for us to be in school, looking at jobs, looking at the world changing, and not being, seeing no way through it. And it's being able to put across that there's always a way through things. You just have to find the way.
And looking at Jersey and what you've experienced in Jersey, you mentioned about how stairs. This is an old building. It wouldn't be ideal for someone in a wheelchair, for instance. How far along the journey is Jersey generally, and how far do you think it has to go, and what does that end goal look like?
I think Jersey is, I don't want to say hampered, but we have a lot of old buildings. It's which is lovely, because it actually makes the island more attractive. It makes it look there. But we do need to start looking at actually how do we make things accessible, and that isn't just stairs, ramps, disabled toilets. Again, that's the beauty of kind of what the disability team here in Jersey are doing, is they're looking across the piece. There's all sorts of disabilities out there. There's the hidden disabilities that aren't as visual as mine, that people don't take into account. People probably don't talk about enough. It's getting having those sort of disabilities talked about and out, so that we can look at the accessibility for those people, whatever that might be. It might not be anything to do with stairs, it might be more the atmosphere, the noise, how it looks. We've got to work across the piece to be able to talk and have conversations about that. And I think Jersey's great step ahead, if you like, to counter our logistical problems with old buildings, is that we are a close community. You know, I've lived here for over 10 years now, and it is just being able to see that people do care, people do see, you see the same people day to day, people do want to invest in each other and look after each other. So I think if we're slightly backwards with our poor buildings, and our old buildings are slightly hampered by that, we are further forwards in the fact that we have a community that wants to talk about this and wants to do their best they can to make life accessible for everyone.
And by talking about it, do you think perhaps a goal is that that disability doesn't matter or doesn't become a topic because people don't consider it? It's just as normal as a door, as a wall, as a normal person. It's just, is that the end goal, or do you think disability in itself should perhaps be celebrated?
I think the end goal is that it all becomes just an easy conversation. It's something we can all talk about, no matter what it is, whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about gender, whether we're talking about disability. It's being able to have that conversation openly and without any fear or taboo, and not going one way or the other. It's just how we would communicate with that person as a person. It's actually, if we go, mentioned, if you put people on pedestals or if you pity people, then we're going too far one left or right. We want to make sure that we're in the centre. It's something where we can all have a conversation about and feel that we can talk about it and understand it better, because people need to ask questions. People need to understand. You can hear me even talking about hidden disabilities, and clearly I don't know a lot about them, because there is still that taboo of having conversations with people. You think, I know they've got a blue badge, but I don't understand what it is or what's wrong with them, because I can't see metal bits sticking out of their shorts. So it's getting to the point where actually we can all talk about it, we can all understand, and actually consider that everyone is a person and a human being, and whether they've got disabilities or whatever it is, they're there, and we can have that conversation with them.
Which brings us neatly on to the back to the survey. Tell me a little bit about it in terms of who you're trying to get to engage with it, and just really just to perhaps allay any fears that it might be a weighty tome, it might take too long. Just tell me a little bit about what people can expect, and then tell me how people can access it.
Yes, certainly. I'm glad I put my money where my mouth is and completed the survey myself this morning. So the whole point, it is, as I know I keep saying it, but it's opening up the dialogue, it's having the conversation about disability. You can access it on gov.je, just search for disability survey. Obviously there's a lot of social media out there at the moment about it. You click on it. It does not take long. As I did it this morning, I think it took me less than 5 minutes. It's very clear, it's very easy to understand, and actually it's targeted at everyone. And it's the way the questions are phrased is that you can, if you have a disability, you can answer them, and if you don't have a disability, you can answer them. If you know someone with a disability, you can answer them. It is there for everyone to be able to have their piece and have their say, and just so that we do feel that taboo washing away, that we can talk about, that we can get people having that conversation, completing the survey. It's easy to do, but also I noticed you can also win £150, which I didn't know about until I completed it this morning. So if you want to also enter that in the competition, that's another little bit of incentive for you. And
finally, Stuart, what will once the deadline's complete and you have this data, what will happen to the responses? How will it form the next step of the strategy?
I believe that the plan is that it will inform the wider strategy through working groups. The information will be looked at, it will be then taken out to all the different stakeholders to actually see how we can drive this forwards. What is next for Jersey?
Stuart, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to Stuart Penn for talking with me today, and thank you for listening to the Bailiwick Podcast. You can find the podcast on all the usual pod places, and don't forget to like and share. The music at the beginning and the end of this podcast is I Shift by Weight by Luno. Tune in next week for more.